The morning sun streamed to the tall windows of Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches packed with curious onlookers. Word had spread to the courthouse like wildfire. Two children were actually representing themselves and their grandmother in a housing dispute. Court clerks, reporters, and legal aid workers filled every available seat, their conversations creating a nervous buzz that seemed to vibrate through the air. At the plaintiff's table sat an unusual sight that made seasoned lawyers do double takes. Emma and Ethan Rodriguez, identical twins with serious dark eyes and neatly combed black hair, flanked their frail grandmother Rosa. The children wore their best clothes, Emma in a navy blue dress with small white flowers, Ethan in a button-down shirt and tie that seemed too big for his small frame. Between them sat stacks of legal documents, meticulously organized and tabbed with colored sticky notes. Rosa Rodriguez clutched her worn purse with trembling hands, her weathered face etched with worry lines that had deepened over the past months. At 73, she had survived immigration, the death of her son and daughter-in-law in a devastating car accident 3 years ago, and the challenge of raising two extraordinary grandchildren on a fixed income. But nothing had prepared her for this moment, watching her 7-year-old grandchildren prepare to argue her case in front of a real judge. "Abuela, remember what we practiced," Emma whispered, placing her tiny hand over her grandmother's. "We've got this." Ethan nodded seriously, adjusting the small reading glasses perched on his nose. "The law is on our side, Abuela. Justice will prevail." Their confidence seemed almost surreal. These were children who should have been in 2nd grade, worrying about spelling tests and playground games. Instead, they spoke with the gravity of seasoned attorneys, their vocabulary peppered with legal terms that most adults couldn't pronounce correctly. The twins' journey to this courtroom had begun 6 months earlier when their landlord, Marcus Blackwell, had launched what could only be described as a calculated campaign of harassment designed to force Rosa from her rent-controlled apartment. The cramped 2-bedroom unit in East L.A. had been their sanctuary for 30 years, where Rosa had raised her son, and later, where she had welcomed her orphaned grandchildren with open arms. Emma and Ethan weren't ordinary children, though Rosa often wished they could be. By age 4, they were reading chapter books. By 5, they had exhausted the local library's children's section and moved on to adult literature. By 7, they were consuming legal texts with the same enthusiasm other kids showed for comic books. Their teachers called them gifted. Rosa called them her little miracles. When Blackwell began his eviction efforts, shutting off hot water for days at a time, scheduling emergency repairs that flooded their apartment, and sending threatening letters filled with legal jargon, Rosa felt helpless. She couldn't afford the $300 per hour attorney she had consulted, and legal aid had a 6-month waiting list. But Emma and Ethan saw something different in those threatening letters. They saw patterns, inconsistencies, and what they recognized from their legal reading as clear violations of tenant rights law. "Abuela," Emma had said one evening, looking up from a thick book titled California Landlord-Tenant Law, "Mr. Blackwell is breaking the law." Systematic harassment with intent to circumvent rent control statutes. Ethan had added matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. "It's clearly documented in Municipal Code Section 151.09. Rosa had stared at her grandchildren in amazement. While other kids their age were learning to tie their shoes, Emma and Ethan were dissecting complex housing regulations. "We can represent you, Abuela," Emma had declared with a certainty only children possess. "We've been studying." The court clerk, Janet Murphy, had nearly dropped her coffee when the twins walked into the courthouse filing office 3 weeks later. Emma carried a briefcase that was almost as tall as she was, while Ethan pushed a small cart loaded with perfectly organized legal documents. "Can I help you, children? Are you looking for your parents?" Janet had asked, assuming they were lost. "We're here to file a complaint for illegal eviction and harassment on behalf of our client, Rosa Rodriguez," Emma had announced, heaving the briefcase onto the counter. Janet had laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of prank, but as Ethan methodically laid out properly formatted legal documents, her expression shifted from amusement to confusion to outright shock. The papers were professionally prepared, correctly filed, and demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of housing law that most paralegals would envy. "You did this yourselves?" Janet had stammered. Pro-se representation is a constitutional right. Ethan had replied politely, age is not a disqualifying factor under California law. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, sitting in Judge Morrison's courtroom, the twins were about to face their greatest challenge yet. Across the aisle sat Marcus Blackwell, a heavy-set man in an expensive suit whose cold gray eyes radiated arrogance. Next to him, his attorney, Richard Sterling, shuffled through papers with the casual confidence of someone who had never lost a child because no reasonable person would expect to. Judge Morrison entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing behind her as she took her seat at the bench. Patricia Morrison had been a judge for 15 years, and she had seen everything, or so she thought. She looked down at her docket with barely concealed bewilderment. "This is highly unusual," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "I have before me a case where the plaintiffs are represented by themselves, and they happen to be 7 years old." She paused, studying the twins with curiosity rather than dismissal. "I want to make sure everyone understands the gravity of the situation. This is a real legal proceeding with real consequences." Emma stood up, barely tall enough to see over the table. "Your Honor, we understand completely. We're here to seek justice for our grandmother, who has been systematically harassed in violation of Los Angeles Municipal Code and California Civil Code." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself by Emma's articulate response. "Very well," the judge said. "Mr. Sterling, you may begin with your opening statement." Richard Sterling rose with theatrical flair, his $2,000 suit immaculate, his silver hair perfectly styled. He had built his career on intimidation and superior resources, and he clearly expected this to be the shortest case of his life. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice dripping with condescension, "what we have here is a simple case of non-payment of rent and violation of lease terms. My client, Mr. Blackwell, has been more than patient with Mrs. Rodriguez, but enough is enough. The law is clear: tenants must pay their rent on time and maintain their property appropriately." He gestured dismissively toward the twins. "While I admire these children's creativity, this is a courtroom, not a school play. The facts are simple. Mrs. Rodriguez owes money, and she must vacate the premises. I trust Your Honor will see through this theatrical display and rule based on law, not sentiment." Sterling sat down with a smug smile, clearly confident he had already won. Emma stood up, and the courtroom fell silent. She walked around the table, her small frame somehow commanding attention as she approached the bench. "Your Honor," Emma began, her voice clear and strong, "my grandmother Rosa Rodriguez has lived in her apartment for 30 years. She has never missed a rent payment until 6 months ago, and she only missed those payments because my client," she paused, glancing at Rosa with obvious love, "because our grandmother was in the hospital after Mr. Blackwell's maintenance work, caused sewage to back up into her bedroom, making her deathly ill." The gallery gasped. This wasn't the childish rambling they had expected. Emma continued, "What Mr. Sterling calls simple non-payment is actually systematic harassment designed to circumvent rent control laws. Mr. Blackwell has violated Municipal Code Sections 151.09, 151.10, and 151.28, as well as California Civil Code Section 1941.1. She walked to her table and picked up a thick folder. "We have documented evidence of illegal rent increases, deliberate property damage, harassment of elderly tenants, and retaliatory eviction attempts. This isn't about rent, Your Honor. This is about greed." Judge Morrison leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "Please continue, Counselor." Emma's face lit up at being called Counselor. She returned to the podium, her confidence growing. "Your Honor, when our parents died 3 years ago, our grandmother could have given up. She could have put us in foster care and simplified her life. Instead, she sacrificed everything to keep our family together. She worked double shifts as a seamstress until her arthritis made it impossible. She sold her wedding ring to buy us school supplies. She never complained, never asked for help." Emma's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "Mr. Blackwell sees an elderly woman living alone with 2 children and thinks she's an easy target. He thinks he can intimidate her into abandoning her rights. But we've studied the law, Your Honor. and the law protects people like our grandmother. The courtroom was completely silent now, hanging on every word from this 7-year-old girl who spoke like a seasoned advocate. Emma concluded, "We're not here asking for charity or sympathy. We're here demanding justice under the law. And the law, Your Honor, is very clear about what happens to landlords who systematically abuse their tenants." As Emma returned to her seat, Ethan stood up, pulling a cart loaded with organized evidence to the front of the courtroom. Where Emma had been passionate and emotional, Ethan was methodical and precise. "Your Honor," Ethan began, adjusting his small glasses, "I will now present our evidence in chronological order, beginning with the documented pattern of harassment that started on January 15th of this year." He opened the first of several binders, each tab color-coded and labeled. Exhibit A, Notice of Rent Increase of 400%, which violates Rent Stabilization Ordinance 165,000. Exhibit B, Photos of deliberate property damage caused by Mr. Blackwell's contractors, including broken pipes that flooded our home. Exhibit C, Witness statements from neighbors documenting Mr. Blackwell's verbal threats. Ethan methodically presented each piece of evidence, explaining its legal significance with the precision of an experienced paralegal. The judge and gallery watched in amazement as this small boy built an airtight case, piece by piece. "Your Honor," Ethan continued, "under California Civil Code Section 1942.5, retaliatory eviction is illegal. Under Municipal Code Section 151.09, harassment of tenants is punishable by fines up to $10,000 per violation. We can prove Mr. Blackwell committed at least 15 separate violations." Marcus Blackwell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, whispering urgently to his lawyer. Sterling's confident smirk had completely vanished. Judge Morrison called a brief recess, and during the break, the twins comforted their grandmother, who was overwhelmed by pride and emotion. "Mijos," Rosa whispered, tears streaming down her face, "your parents will be so proud. You are fighting for our family." "We learned from you, Abuelo," Emma said softly. "You taught us that family protects family." When court resumed, Sterling called Marcus Blackwell to stand. Blackwell strutted forward with false confidence, clearly expecting this portion to go smoothly. "Mr. Blackwell," Sterling began, "please tell the court about Mrs. Rodriguez's rental history." "She's been a problem tenant from day one." Blackwell lied smoothly, always complaining, always behind on rent, always making excuses. Emma stood up. "Objection, Your Honor." "Perjury." Judge Morrison was surprised. "On what grounds?" Emma walked to her table and retrieved a thick folder. "Your Honor, I have 30 years of rent receipts showing my grandmother never missed a payment until this year. I also have letters from Mr. Blackwell's own property management company praising her as a model tenant, as recently as 2019. She handed the documents to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Blackwell's face reddened as he realized these children had outprepared his expensive legal team. Judge Morrison examined the documents, her expression growing stern. "Mr. Blackwell, these receipts directly contradict your testimony. Would you like to revise your statement?" Blackwell stammered, looking to his lawyer for help, but Sterling was frantically shuffling through papers, clearly unprepared for this level of documentation. Emma continued her cross-examination. "Mr. Blackwell, is it true that you own 12 other rent-controlled properties in Los Angeles?" But that's not relevant. "Is it true that you've been cited by the Housing Authority for harassment at 4 of those properties in the past 2 years?" Blackwell's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Irrelevant." "Your Honor," Emma replied calmly, "this establishes a pattern of behavior showing systematic harassment of elderly, vulnerable tenants. It's highly relevant to Mr. Blackwell's credibility and intent." Judge Morrison nodded. "I'll allow it." "Please answer the question, Mr. Blackwell." Those were misunderstandings." Emma pulled out another folder. "Your Honor, I have documentation from the Housing Authority showing Mr. Blackwell was fined $25,000 for identical harassment tactics at his property on Sunset Boulevard just 6 months ago." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Blackwell was sweating now, his expensive suit subtly looking like a costume that didn't fit. But Emma wasn't finished. She returned to her table and nodded to Ethan, who handed her a small digital recorder. "Mr. Blackwell," Emma said, her 7-year-old voice carrying the authority of a prosecutor, "do you recognize your own voice?" Over the following weeks, the story of the 7-year-old twins who defeated a slumlord in court went viral. They received scholarship offers from top universities, internship opportunities at prestigious law firms, and hundreds of letters from families seeking their help. But Emma and Ethan remained focused on what mattered most: their family and their community. They used the settlement money to establish a small legal aid clinic in their neighborhood, helping other elderly tenants fight harassment and illegal evictions. Rosa's health improved dramatically once the stress of potential eviction was removed. She returned to her volunteer work at the local church and even started taking English classes at the community college, inspired by her grandchildren's belief that it's never too late to learn something new. The twins continued to excel in school while maintaining their legal advocacy work. They helped 12 other families avoid illegal evictions in their first year, always working pro bono, and always emphasizing that justice should be available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay expensive legal fees. Emma developed a particular passion for family law, while Ethan gravitated toward housing rights and civil liberties. Both maintained their dream of becoming lawyers not for money or prestige, but continue fighting for families like theirs. On the first anniversary of their courtroom victory, Judge Morrison invited the twins back to her courthouse for a special ceremony. She presented them with honorary certificates recognizing their contribution to justice and their inspiration to the legal community. "You showed us all of the laws and about age or experience or expensive suits," Judge Morrison told the assembled crowd. "It's about courage, preparation, and an unshakable belief in justice. You reminded us why we became lawyers in the first place." As the ceremony concluded, Emma and Ethan stood hand in hand with their grandmother, looking out a room full of legal professionals who had gathered to honor two 7-year-old children who had changed their perspective on what was possible. "Abuela," Emma whispered, "do you think Mom and Pop would be proud?" Rosa squeezed their hands tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Mijos, they are watching from heaven, and they have never been more proud. You didn't just save our home. You showed the world that heroes come in all sizes." The story of Emma and Ethan Rodriguez proves that age is never a barrier to making a difference. When we combine preparation with passion, knowledge with courage, and intelligence with love, we can overcome any obstacle. These remarkable children didn't just win a legal case, they reminded us all that justice belongs to everyone, and that sometimes the smallest voices can speak the loudest truths. Their story continues to inspire families across the country to stand up for their rights, knowing that if two 7-year-old children can take on a powerful landlord and win, then anything is possible when we fight for what's right.